Hello everyone, not only am I going to tell you all about Star Trek Away Missions by Gale Force 9, but I'm going to tell you about the long saga of my attempt to review this game, and in fact, all about reviewing games in general and how hard it can be sometimes. Well, Star Trek Away Missions by Gale Force 9. This is the core set, and I've also got two expansions. The first two that have been released, one is the Romulans and one is the Klingons. Now, this review, well, this has certainly been a mission, I can tell you. But before I get onto all of that, I'm going to give you an idea of how Star Trek Away Missions plays. Now, before I get started, I got these Star Trek Away Missions goodies from Gale Force 9 for free, but I do not charge for my videos and my opinions are always my own. Star Trek Away Missions is a two-player game. Well, you can play with more players if you buy multiple sets. There's a few hand-wavy rules for doing that if you want to, but it's mostly a two-player game, and in the core set, it's the Federation against the Borg, and it's set during the events of the Battle of Wharf 359. And if you know the series well, which I do, and I assume a lot of you do as well if you're watching this video, you'll know that Jean-Luc Picard, spoilers, you ready? If you haven't seen it, turn off now, because I'll be spoiling it. Okay. Jean-Luc Picard turns into a Borg called Locutus. And in this game, here he is, in miniature form. So it's very interesting in that you have the Federation team led by Commander Riker going up against the Borg, led by Locutus. It's a nice little setup. Basically, they're saying that all the destroyed ships after the Battle of Wharf 359, it is 359, isn't it? 359, that was just memory. I remember that, that's pretty good. After that battle, there's all these ships floating around, and so the premise is that these away teams are beaming onto those various ships, trying to get information from the data banks and also salvage bits and pieces and things like that. And as they do that, they of course come into conflict. So there are two things your away missions are trying to do. One is to score missions, get information from terminals and things like that. And also you'll be coming into conflict with the other away missions and fighting them. So let's talk about the basic game rules. I won't go into heavy detail, but this will give you an idea of how to play. You take turns putting down these large map tiles, and there are two sides to them. You've either got a Federation spaceship side and you've got a Borg cube side. So the player who rolls first can basically choose which side they want to use. They're pretty similar. There are a few little changes. And then you put them down in a certain order. Then you roll another dice and you decide which of the two boards belongs to each side as their starting boards. And that's where they'll be alternating deploying their figures. You also have a card for each one of the figures that you'll be using, one of these. At the start of the game, you'll be placing all these tiny little plastic markers in the holes, and they keep track of your attack score, your defense score, your skill score, and your movement. So that's how you'll keep track of that. And the important thing to remember when it comes to the Borg is that they don't all deploy at once. You'll start with only two figures from the Borg away team. In the second round, two more will come in. And then on the third round, the last two will come in. 3 rounds. And in fact, this game is only made up of 3 rounds. So it's pretty short and sharp. Though, you know, each of those rounds goes for a decent amount of time. So you're probably looking at about an hour for a game. Maybe a little bit more. The bulk of the game is driven by card play. You have 2 different types of cards for each side, the mission deck and the support deck, and you draw 5 cards from each of these decks to get started. When you get started, you can mulligan your first hand. So you can take any of the cards out of that 10-card hand that you have to start with, put them back in their respective decks, shuffle them, and then draw out new cards. So this is probably going to happen every single time you play because you want to fine-tune your hand a little bit or as much as possible. So probably find at the start of the game there's that little period where everybody's going, well, I don't want those cards, and putting them back in their decks and drawing new ones in an attempt to get the best combo of cards they can to start with. Players alternate activating their figures and taking a couple of actions with each. Now, when you start the round with less characters than your opponent, you get a bonus token for every character that you don't have. So I didn't express that very well, but say the other person has 4 characters and you have 2, you get 2 bonus tokens. And those bonus action tokens will allow you to take 1 action for each one of those tokens. When you activate one of your characters, you get 2 actions. You can move around the board, you can take an attack action, you can also go into cover, you can take a special action that might be dictated by the character or a card or something like that, or you can draw a new support card, an extra support card, and finally you can take one of your mission cards, put it back into the mission deck and draw a new mission. So how do you win? Well, you win by scoring mission cards, and these are the absolute crucial meat of the game because each one of these cards has a certain number of points on them. In the 3 rounds, just 3 rounds of the game, you'll be trying to score as many of these as possible. After 3 rounds, you count up your scores and the person with the most wins. So that all sounds pretty straightforward, but of course the game is in the card play. And what you'll be trying to do is get the best combo of scoring cards and also either attacking or evading the other player, basically doing the strategies that fit your particular team. For example, the Federation is particularly good at scoring missions. So what it wants to do is get to the right terminals on the right parts of the board and score those mission cards. The Borg, however, is not so good at scoring missions. It's a bit harder for them. So they have multiple strategies. They can try and score missions to win points, or they can be more aggressive and try and assimilate the Federation away team. And they can actually assimilate them. So if you manage to take down a Federation member, you put a little overlay over its character card like this, and it becomes a member of the Borg team, which is quite cute. So not only does the Federation player lose that player, but the Borg gains the actions from their new assimilated character. The support cards have a wide range of different things. There's equipment which you can apply to different characters, like giving them weapons or healing abilities or things like that. There are events that bring in particular characters from Star Trek The Next Generation. There are all kinds of things that you can do to modify the gameplay with that. Sometimes they take an action, sometimes they don't. And of course, as I mentioned before, all the mission cards are your scoring cards. Now, at the start of rounds 2 and 3, you'll be able to discard as many cards as you want from your hand, and then you'll draw back up to 5 support cards and 5 mission cards. Each player also has a special mission card which they can choose at the start of the game. There are 2 on a single card that you get, and you can choose one, and that'll give you an overall goal that allows you to score more points during the game. So movement is very straightforward. If you do a movement action, you get to move as many spaces as you have on your character card. For the Federation, that's usually 4 spaces, or if they're wounded, it may go down to 2 spaces, and you just move from space to space through the corridors. If you get into a turbo lift, you can go to any other adjacent turbo lift on a different board. Now keep in mind the Borg from the core set, they're going to be coming in later on in the round. So we have 2 more coming in on round 2 and 2 more on round 3. And they can beam in anywhere on the ship. So they can come in right next to another Federation player if you want to. Now the thing with being in different squares is that you cannot share a space with an enemy character. However, you can have 2 friendly characters in one space. And this is important because if you're in a space and you have another character in the same space, they can give you backup. And that means when you're attacking, defending, or making a skill roll, you get an extra dice. So let's get to attacking. Now, when you want to attack someone, you will be using a particular weapon, and they'll usually be on your character card, or if you have an equipped weapon, you may use that line instead. And that can modify the amount of attack dice and damage that you do, or have special rules like stun and things like that. So basically what you do is you roll the number of attack dice that you have, your opponent rolls their defense dice, and then, using a mechanic that we haven't seen since the old Gale Force 9 game Spartacus, we line up the dice on this dice board. Now, this dice board is really nice. You probably won't end up using it later on because it just really keeps the dice neat. But you can just place them on the table and line them up against each other. So the attacker and the defender line up their dice from the highest number dice down to the lowest number dice, and then they compare the results. Now, if the defender's dice number is equal to or higher than the attacker's dice number, they cancel out that dice. If the attacker's number is higher than the defender's dice, then that's a hit. If the attacker has dice which are completely undefended, they hit on a roll of 4 or more. But it doesn't stop there. This goes on a little bit more because you can discard cards from your hand to re-roll dice, and you can do this in succession, back and forth. Starting with the attacker, they can choose to discard a card and re-roll as many of their dice as they wish. Then the defender can do it, and they can go back and forth until both players are happy with the results or don't want to spend any more cards. And this is where some of the tension comes into the game, especially in the combat, because you've always got that choice of whether you want to discard and waste cards so you can get the reroll, or you want to keep the cards in your hand as part of your strategy. Now, something you'll be doing a lot is going to the various terminals all over the board and rolling skill tests. And you can roll skill tests for other things as well. Skill tests are very simple. You roll the number of dice given by your skill value, and you usually just need a 4 or above on one of them to succeed. However, there is such a thing as opposed skill tests, which are done in the same way as combat. It's skill versus skill, and then you line them up on the dice board and do things the same way as you do for combat. Keep in mind, as I said, if you have another friendly character in the same space, they give you backup, so you get a bonus die for all those attack, defense, and skill tests. And really, that's basically it. It's pretty straightforward. You'll be moving about the board, trying to get your characters in the right position to score missions. However, depending on your team, it might not be just about going to terminals. It might be, for example, the Klingons who are more aggressive. They might want to actually attack other people for points. It all depends on what your mission cards are and which ones you draw and how many points you can get. Of course, you'll be getting into combat, you'll be doing skill rolls, and you have to do all this over only 3 rounds, so there aren't a lot of actions to waste, especially with the Borg, who on round 1 are only going to have 2 characters on the board and a couple of bonus tokens. So there we go with the rules. Now let's get into the saga of reviewing Star Trek away missions. So, Star Trek away missions. Now, before I get into the long saga of my review for this game, I'm just going to mention a few things that I wasn't crazy about and get them out of the way first. One is that I really personally dislike this kind of box because, you know, it shows off the miniatures, which is fine, and I can see that it's been designed to be impressive on the shelf so people can look at the miniatures and decide whether that's for them. I don't know if that's a great decision because these miniatures do tend to polarize people. They do have a slightly cartoony, big-headed style, and, you know, I can see they've done that to do something different. However, to me, it kind of jars with the fact that all the cards have screen captures from the series itself. So the cards are very realistic in tone, and then you've got this sort of slightly cartoony, slightly kind of goofy look to the miniatures. And I just feel that the two jar a little bit. But some people have absolutely loved the miniatures, so it's completely a matter of personal taste. However, these boxes do annoy me because when you repack them, you've got to repack them exactly this way to keep the same effect. Otherwise, you have stuff with just windows looking on components, and they're kind of flimsy when they're, you know, not solid boxes in the end. I've just got a little bugbear about them. That's just me. Other people may not care. I also think that there's a bit of opportunity missed on these character cards, and I think they could be a little better designed. We've got tokens here that go into the little holes, and you put these in at the start of the game and take them out as they get used. And they really just sit in the holes. They're not pegs or anything, so they don't stay in there. They're a little bit, you know, they move around and fall out. I wasn't crazy about them. The holes are very close to the bottom of the board, which is kind of aesthetically unpleasing. The text is small when there's big gaps. You know, that could be changed depending on how much text there is. The attack line is quite small. They're just not very attractive looking. What I would have done with something like this, I think, is used more of either a screen cap from the game of the character in some kind of iconic pose or something. I don't know, they're just a bit underwhelming, unfortunately. The boards themselves are absolutely fine. They look good. They're nice and clear and thematic. They look nice. And the cards are absolutely fine too, though I did notice a few places where the typography could have been better. So particular places where there were strange line breaks and everything, where it would have made it easier to read. I just felt like the graphic design could just go up another little notch. And that's because, of course, I've been a graphic designer all my life, and I'm very, very picky about these things, and I'm very passionate about graphic designs. So I just think it could be a little bit better. But if there's one thing I've noticed about being graphic design is that other people don't get worried about these things as much as I do. I think, however, that the quality of graphic design can lead to an overall raising of the tone and look of professionalism that is hard to put your finger on. I can point out the reasons why those things make it look better because I'm experienced, but for other people, it's just a feeling. It just feels like a really professional product. And while this is an attractive product, which absolutely is fine, I just think some of the things like the character cards and stuff, you know, you've got pictures of the miniatures here with glowies around them. I just think that if that was a bit better, the whole look and feel would just be a bit more schmick. Oh, and there's a mistake on the reference card because it says backup. You can roll an additional die on attack and skill tests, where you can do them on defense tests as well. But anyway, you won't need that because you'll have my sheet. One other little gripe is that all the counters just have a name on them. Activated, stun, take cover. They're not very interesting. I noticed this tendency in another game I think I had a go at, Dune, a game of conquest and diplomacy, when it had a picture of the storm on a token which went around the board and it had storm token written on it. It's just a bit obvious. It's kind of more thematic and interesting if you have a token which sort of communicates what it is without actually having to write the name on it. Another culprit in that way is the dice board, which is just called dice board. When you watch review videos, you might be thinking, that looks like a lark. I get a free game and all I have to do is play a game a few times and then film a review. Easy. It's not that easy, folks. I can tell you right now. And I'm going to tell you in the context of my review for this game. Because when you get a game for review, obviously you have to play it a few times to get to know it and to formulate your thoughts on what you think of it. And of course, we all have limited gaming time. Unless you're running a content creation full time, which I unfortunately don't have the luxury of doing, it's going to take up weeks of game sessions. I only get to play a game once, at the most twice a week. So we've got lots of games to play. And when I'm coming back time and again saying, I've got to play Star Trek away missions 3 or 4 times or something like that, that's taking up weeks of gaming. So you've got to have some tolerant friends as well, because they might not always want to play the game that you want to play. So when I brought out Star Trek away missions with my usual gaming opponent on a Thursday night, we had a game and I've got to tell you, it fell absolutely flat. And I thought, what is going on? This is weird. I mean, to me, the game system seemed fine. There's nothing revolutionary going on, really. A lot of people have compared this game to Warhammer Underworlds, and I can see there are some similarities there. It's basically teams of players on a board. There's card-driven gameplay, you're scoring missions, that kind of thing. There are some differences between the two, but it's the same type of game, really. So I thought, it looks pretty straightforward. But for some reason, when we played, the Federation kept winning. And we played 3 games where in every single one, the Federation got so far ahead on scoring missions that the Borg didn't have a chance. And I thought, what am I doing? Because by the time we got to the end of the 3rd game, my opponent was saying, I don't want to play this game anymore. And I thought, well, I could do a review right now and say this game is terrible, it doesn't work. But I thought, surely Gale Force 9, who I know well, they're lovely people, I thought, surely they haven't released a game which can fall so flat. I must be doing something wrong. And then began my Star Trek away missions obsession. To the point where my gaming opponent was just saying, stop, enough of that game, because I kept bringing it up. And in fact, I was contacting other reviewers who had done reviews of the game that were largely positive and writing to them and saying, why was your experience largely positive and mine was so negative? So in trying to work this conundrum out, I actually contacted Gale Force 9 and I had a long conversation online with Phil Yates, one of the designers, and I told him my concerns. I said, we can't seem to beat the Federation. They get so far ahead on points. The Borg seem too weak. What can I do as a Borg player, and why does it seem so unbalanced as to be unfun? And he was, of course, very surprised that the Federation were getting so ahead on points and this was happening because, of course, they'd play tested the game over and over and played it hundreds of times and it was absolutely fine as far as they were concerned. So after a few emails back and forth and, as I said, a long face-to-face conversation on video, Phil very kindly offered to let me play the game with him online. And we did that by actually setting up a couple of cameras and each having a set and playing together. This time I played the Federation and he played the Borg. You're probably wondering what happened. The game was great. It was really fun. We had a really good game and it was close in points. It was so close. It was a draw, in fact. And the game was everything that I thought it should have been. It was a tense battle. Interesting things happened. The scoring was relatively close. Phil had a bit of bad luck, I had a bit of good luck, and we managed to get to a draw, which I was very happy with because he's one of the designers. So at that point, of course, I was thinking, why did our first 3 games fall so flat? And this is where the interesting thing is. I think that the game has the potential, with the Federation and the Borg in the core set, to fall flat if you play in a certain way. Now, I'm in a real quandary about this because on one hand, I think, okay, if you play it enough, you won't play in that particular way and you'll never have that problem again. However, the other side of me says, well, why is it even possible? And a good game design shouldn't have a game state where everything falls flat. It should never happen because it's part of the design that that doesn't happen. So what I'm saying is this is a good game, but I suggest when you play it out of the core set, and I must admit I haven't played with the expansions yet. They have different play styles and I'll eventually get onto trying those, but I haven't played with them. This is just about the core set because I've spent so much time with the core set. What I'm saying is that if you're playing with the core set and you're playing as the Borg, I don't think it will be possible, and I could be wrong, but I think it'd be very difficult to win as the Borg by just sitting back and trying to score missions and letting the Federation sit back and score missions. And there is an interesting thing about this player is that depending on the two sides that you have, you can have that type of game. Now, if you're playing against the Klingons, that's probably never going to happen because the Klingons are an aggressive team and they want to get into combat to score missions. However, with the Borg and the Federation, you can ignore each other and not actually have any conflict at all and just go to the terminals you want to go to and score the missions you want to do and slap down the points. Now, the reason this is so much easier for the Federation is that they can just score by rolling one skill test and scoring a mission. They can score higher point missions by getting, say, 3 people on the right terminals and then doing the mission and having those 3 people in the right place and bang, 40 points, 50 points, just like that. For the Borg, it's a lot harder because for those high scoring cards for them, you usually have to go to a terminal, actually spend an action to put down the mission card on the table, and then you have to score it quite a few number of times. For the high scoring ones, up to maybe 7 times. And you do that by every time you get a success, you put a token on the card, and eventually when you put 7 on it, you score it. Now that number varies, of course, depending on the points that you get for the mission. But the fact remains, it takes a lot longer for the Borg to score missions than it does the Federation. So if you're trying to do a head-to-head just for scoring missions, unless the Federation are really unlucky and get a really bad hand of cards throughout the whole game, you're going to find it very hard to win as the Borg. Now, in my first game, that's what I tried to do. We both thought, okay, well, how you win this game is scoring missions. So I'm just going to score missions. That's all we did. And the two of us didn't have any conflict at all. We just did our own thing and scored missions. And that's why it fell so flat, because I just thought, nothing's happening here. We're not having any interaction. There's no combat. Nothing's happening. We're just scoring missions. And I think that's a little bit of a failing of the game that you actually can have a game like that, because I don't think that's a very interesting game. You've got to have some interaction to make it interesting. So in the second game, I thought I'm going to be more aggressive as the Borg. And I was helped by the fact that my opponent, as the Federation, decided to attack me a couple of times. Now, when the Borg get attacked in this game, they can use that to their advantage. Not only can they sort of resurrect themselves and come back on the board, but they can also get adapt tokens as they get killed or score particular missions. And those adapt tokens make them more and more powerful, so they get stronger and stronger because they start very weak combat-wise. So in that game, I became much more stronger and I felt this feeling of growth as the Borg. I was getting stronger and I managed to assimilate 2 of the Federation. But by the time I'd done that, I wasn't actually getting points for assimilating the Federation. The points were still coming from scoring missions. So the early lead that the Federation had in scoring missions still allowed them to get a runaway win. So at that point, I thought, what's going on? I mean, for this first game, I haven't interacted and I've lost badly. For the second game, I have interacted and tried to assimilate them and I still have lost badly. Then we played again, I lost badly again, and the difference between us was like 80 points. It was just ridiculous. So again, you're probably wondering, well, what was different about that fourth game that I played with Phil? It's because it was a mixture of scoring and of conflict. And in this way, I think the Borg have to sort of poke at the Federation to bother them. So they have to sort of get in the way. They have to sort of get them into corners where they can't get past you. Though there is a card that allows you to run past enemy characters. But if you can sort of get them away from the terminals, disrupt their plans, you're going to have more success as the Borg. Now, the thing is that the Borg start off really weak. There's only 2 on the board in round 2, and then 4, and then 6 in subsequent rounds. But they're quite weak combat-wise. They only usually have, 1 attack or something like that. The good thing is that they can keep at it because they have an ability called the Hive Mind. And the Hive Mind means that any Borg character can take an action with any other Borg character anywhere on the board. So Even though you've only got 2 actions per character, one Borg character can spend the whole round just hacking into one Federation character if they want to. Now you've got to be careful because most of the time you're not actually going to be scoring for assimilating the opponent's characters. However, you'll be stopping them from scoring, and this is the crucial thing. So the Borg are quite a challenging team to play, and I really think maybe not the best choice for the core set. Now, thematically, they work perfectly, of course, because the Borg and the Federation were in the Battle of Wolf 359 together. So they work as part of the story. That's all great. But I also think that the Borg are more challenging, and probably the game would have been better served if you'd had 2 teams that work together a bit more effectively right off the bat. So what I'm saying is, what does this all boil down to? And I've been talking for a long time now. I think the game system is absolutely fine. I don't think there's anything unbelievably groundbreaking about it. I mean, it's just teams taking 2 actions, moving, scoring points, and a whole lot of, interesting support cards that do various things. Some nice card play. It's all good. And when it works well. As I said, that game with Phil was close. It was fun. Interesting thematic things happened. Here's the Borg assimilated Data, and then Data tried to score some points for him, but he had bad luck. So it felt like Data was sort of fighting against his conditioning and refusing to work for the Borg and things like that. So it does have some nice thematic fun as well. And that was a really good game. But there is also the potential with these 2 teams to have a bit of a damp squib of a game if you just decide to both sit there and try and score missions. Of course, the Borg player is quickly going to work out that they are failing all the time if they just let the Federation score missions and don't do anything about it. I might also point out that my opponent is a very smart guy, and he played very, very well and also had some good luck as well. So it just goes to show that when you're doing a review, it's not as simple as just playing it a couple of times and churning out a video opinion of it. You really have to stick at a game sometimes. And I had to stick at Star Trek away missions before I finally had the experience I was looking for. I'm now looking forward actually to playing the other teams and seeing how they work together. As I said, the Klingons are obviously more aggressive and they go for honor by attacking other people. The Romulans are sneaky and they can move around the ship and take pot shots at people and then disappear to other places. They sort of do spy missions and things like that. So they should shake up the play in sort of an interesting way. The other thing that shakes up the play a bit is that you have extra cards. When you set up the game, you have 20 support cards and 20 mission cards, but the game comes with some extra cards so you can do a little bit of deck building and you can push your deck in a particular direction. For example, the Borg deck, you can push in a more aggressive assimilation type direction a little bit, or you can go more towards trying to get specializations and winning the game that way. So it's going to be very interesting to see the future of Star Trek away missions and what people think when they get it into their hands. I would just say it comes with a warning. Just be careful of those first few games and maybe stick at it a little bit longer. Now, of course, in this incredibly huge industry that we have and so many games coming out all the time, I think there's going to be a few people who play the base set and go, oh, this doesn't really work, that game didn't really work. And I think, like me, you probably have to give it a few more games and try a few different strategies before you find the fun in this game and the way that it works well together. And when it does work, it's great. The other thing about being a reviewer is that you have experience of many, many games over a long, long period of time. And as soon as I had that good game, I could tell that that's the way the game should have been played. There was just something wrong about those earlier ones. And I played at that time with a designer and it just felt right and felt fun. So after all that, I do recommend Star Trek away missions. And I hope you found that discussion interesting and enlightening. And if you didn't, you've turned off by now anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Now, of course, I've created a rules and reference for this game, as I do for all the games that I buy and review. This one is a summary on one sheet like so, and then you get a couple of reference sheets which you can use during the game. And on the back of this reference sheet, you'll find the rules for 3 or 4 player free-for-all games and 4 player team games. For those, of course, you will need 2 basic sets if you want to play that way. I'm not sure how that works. I haven't tried it out, so who knows how that works. I would say it's predominantly a 2-player game, but maybe those free-for-all and team games work as well. Well, everyone, I hope you've enjoyed that rather long-winded and detailed explanation of what it's like to review games sometimes and what I think of Star Trek away missions. And I hope this video helps you make an informed decision. I will see you next time. Don't forget to go to orderofgamers.com, the Esoteric Order of Gamers website. You'll find my rules and reference and summary. You can download it and print it out for yourself if you've got Star Trek Away missions. Until next time, good gaming, everybody.